A Denver gas station clerk started his day with a pair of guns in his face, and he's pretty sure he recognizes the guys doing the pointing.
Denver 7's Patrick Price tonight on the clerk, the suspects, and what they were after other than cash.
Never, ever drive at night.
A man robbed a gas station at gunpoint, but no one expected Joe Rogan to show up and take him down with a single move. The scene was chaotic, with panicked customers and a masked thief fleeing the store. Out of nowhere, Rogan arrived, his bold actions leaving everyone stunned. How could a podcaster step into such danger and come out on top? Tune in, because what happened next will change the way you look at Joe Rogan forever. A quiet town's night turns chaotic. This wasn't supposed to happen. A robbery in a sleepy town, an innocent dad and his kid stuck in the middle of it all, and out of nowhere, a famous podcaster comes crashing into the chaos. Damien had already started regretting his decision to stop at this gas station. After all, they were only a couple of hours from their destination. He could have just pushed through, but fate had other ideas. Out there, under the dim streetlight, Damien found himself staring at a man whose intentions were clear. Empty your pockets, or else. The robber's attention quickly shifted to Damien's daughter, and at that moment, panic turned into something much worse. Before we go further, it's clear that this encounter spiraled into something far more intense than anyone could have imagined, and what followed will leave you absolutely stunned. Just as things looked their bleakest in rides Joe Rogan, helmet on, looking like some kind of unexpected action hero, you can imagine the masked man, baffled and a bit nervous, barking orders for Joe to do as he's told. And the famous podcaster, always the entertainer, even in a moment like this, plays along, emptying his wallet and moving calmly. But what's happening behind that helmet is something else entirely. You see, he isn't just any guy. He's quick, sharp, and doesn't back down easily. When the robber demands the car keys, Joe picks them up, gives a little toss, just a bit off, and then all hell breaks loose. Damien's car becomes a cage. The famous podcaster, with one smooth move, has already swapped the keys, making it impossible for the robber to get the car started. Locked inside, the masked man starts to panic, pounding the windows, shouting for help. But the podcaster's not about to let this one slide. He stands there, making a call to the police while the guy inside is fuming. It's a strange sight, a podcaster turned hero standing in front of a locked car, the robber inside cursing his luck. The podcaster's face, as calm as ever, doesn't flinch. He's in control now. But the story doesn't end with the cops hauling the guy away. As the podcaster waited, something shifted. The robber, now caught in the middle of his own desperation, started spilling out his story. Hard times, hungry kids, and a sense of hopelessness that pushed him over the edge. The podcaster, for all his swagger, has always been someone who listens, really listens. And that's exactly what he did, even as sirens drew closer. He's heard stories like this before, on his podcast, in interviews in life, but this time it was raw, right in front of him, and it was real. When the police finally arrived, they took the man away. But the podcaster wasn't done yet. He got the guy's details, where he lived, his kids' names. This wasn't just some publicity stunt. He took it upon himself to visit that family, to make sure they were okay. He didn't want the kids to suffer because of one desperate act. He offered them help, food, education, and support, so they wouldn't feel the need to make the same mistakes. 7 years later, when the man got out of prison, the podcaster was still there, offering a hand, a chance to make things right. Joe invited Damien, Melissa, and even Kevin, the former robber, to his show. It wasn't just a podcast episode. It was a story of redemption, of how one night changed everyone involved. Damien, who thought he was just on a late-night road trip, found himself part of a story much bigger than himself. Melissa, who once saw her father as the hero, now had two, her dad and the famous podcaster. And Kevin, who had hit rock bottom, now had a second shot at life, thanks to the very man who'd stopped him that night. The thing about the famous podcaster is he's not just a voice behind a microphone. He's a guy who's lived through his own struggles, growing up in a rough household, finding solace in martial arts, And then comedy. He's someone who's made it big, but hasn't forgotten what it means to be down on your luck. And that's what makes this story so unbelievable. He didn't just stop a robbery, he changed lives. He's got a history of giving, of stepping up when people need it most. Whether it's matching donations for charity or pledging earnings to help others in times of tragedy. There's something powerful about the way the famous podcaster navigates life. Whether he's standing in front of a UFC ring or behind a mic, diving deep into conversation with experts, athletes, or even conspiracy theorists. He's a guy who's not afraid to challenge the status quo, to dig into uncomfortable truths, or to help a stranger when the moment calls for it. The robbery that night could have ended in so many ways, most of them bad, but his intervention turned it into something else entirely, a moment of transformation. Not just for Kevin, but for everyone watching, everyone listening. What started as a robbery turned into something unexpected, showing a side of Joe Rogan that many people didn't know, more than just a podcaster. People often look at the famous podcaster and think they've got him figured out. He's the comedian, the fighter, the podcast king. But stories like this one show another side, the side that steps up in real life, in real time, to do the right thing. This isn't the story you expect when you think of him. You picture him debating guests on hot topics or cracking jokes. But there's something undeniably genuine about a guy who's willing to put himself on the line, not for fame, not for money, but just because it's the right thing to do. This whole saga makes you wonder, how many times do we pass up opportunities to step in, to make a difference? The famous podcaster didn't just walk away, even when things got tough. He saw a guy who'd messed up, sure, but he also saw the person behind the mistake. He saw a struggling dad, not just a criminal. And that's what made the difference. It's easy to judge, to write people off, but his actions remind us there's always more beneath the surface. It's a reminder that sometimes the unthinkable can lead to something truly remarkable. His path has never been straightforward, and that's perhaps what gives him the perspective to act in these types of situations. He himself has spoken about his troubled upbringing, about growing up with a father who was violent and unpredictable. His parents divorced when he was young, and he moved with his mother to San Francisco, leaving the chaos behind. These early years shaped his understanding of the world. An understanding that life is complex, that people aren't all good or all bad, and that everyone has a story that runs deeper than what's seen on the surface. He found solace in martial arts, which gave him discipline and a sense of control that was missing from his early years. It wasn't just a sport for him, it was a lifeline. Martial arts was where he found himself, where he built the confidence that would carry him through the rest of his life. He didn't have it easy. Training was brutal, injuries were frequent, and the competition was relentless. But he thrived on it. He became a champion in Taekwondo, and for a while it seemed like this was his path, a professional fighter. But life had different plans. In his late teens, he started experiencing chronic headaches and recurring injuries that made it clear that a career in martial arts wasn't sustainable. It was a hard pill to swallow, giving up on something that had defined him for so long. But he didn't let it end there. He pivoted. He took the resilience he had learned in martial arts and applied it elsewhere, first to teaching and eventually to comedy. His friends always told him he was funny, but it wasn't until he took the stage at an open mic that he realized comedy could be more than just a hobby. His early years in comedy were far from glamorous. He performed wherever he could, bars, small clubs, any place that would give him a mic and a few minutes on stage. The crowds weren't always kind, and the pay was even worse. But he kept at it. He loved the honesty of stand-up, the way it forced you to be genuine, to connect with people. There was no hiding on stage. If you bombed, you bombed. But if you got a laugh, it was the best feeling in the world. It was during these years that he honed his craft, developing the persona that would later make him famous. Comedy opened the door to acting, and before long, he found himself in Hollywood. He landed roles in sitcoms like News Radio, where he played the lovable handyman, Joe Rogan. The show was a hit, and suddenly he was a household name. But acting wasn't his passion. It was fun, and it paid the bills. But it wasn't what he loved. He was always looking for the next challenge, the next thing that would push him out of his comfort zone. That challenge came in the form of the UFC. He had always loved fighting, and when offered a job as a backstage interviewer, he jumped at the chance. It wasn't glamorous work, he wasn't getting paid much, and he was doing it more for the love of the sport than anything else. But he was good at it. His deep knowledge of martial arts and his ability to connect with fighters made him an instant hit with fans. Eventually, he moved into the commentary booth, where he became the voice of the UFC, knowledgeable, passionate, and unfiltered. That night didn't just show Joe's courage. It came from all the things he had been through in his life before, from the stage to the octagon. As his career in the UFC took off, he never let go of his love for comedy. He continued performing, releasing comedy specials, and touring the country. But it was the launch of the Joe Rogan Experience that truly changed everything. What started as a casual podcast with his friends quickly turned into one of the most popular shows in the world. His willingness to talk about anything and everything, his refusal to shy away from controversial topics, and his ability to listen without judgment made the podcast a massive success. The Joe Rogan Experience became a platform for all sorts of voices: scientists, comedians, politicians, athletes, and even conspiracy theorists. He was never afraid to ask tough questions or to challenge his guests. But he also knew when to listen, when to let someone share their story without interruption. It was this balance that drew people in. Listeners felt like they were part of the conversation, like they were sitting in the room with him and his guests, exploring the big questions of life together. Despite the success, he has faced his fair share of controversy. His podcast, known for its open discussions and unfiltered content, has landed him in hot water more than once. He's been criticized for giving a platform to controversial figures, for making offhand comments that were taken the wrong way, and for not always fact-checking his guests in real time. But through it all, he has remained unapologetically himself. He acknowledges his mistakes, learns from them, and keeps moving forward. He's never claimed to be perfect, just a guy trying to make sense of the world, one conversation at a time. This willingness to face controversy head-on, to admit when he's wrong, and to grow from those experiences is what sets him apart. He doesn't shy away from the difficult moments. Instead, he leans into them, using them as opportunities for growth. That's exactly what happened on the night of the gas station robbery. He could have just been a bystander, could have done the bare minimum and walked away. But that's not who he is. He saw an opportunity to make a difference, and he took it. When he visited Kevin's family after the robbery, he didn't go there for praise or recognition. He went because he knew it was the right thing to do. He saw a family in need, children who were innocent victims of their father's desperate choices, and he decided to help. It wasn't about making headlines. It was about doing what he could to make their lives a little bit better. He offered them food, paid for their education, and made sure they had what they needed to get by. It was an act of kindness that went far beyond what anyone expected. The episode was raw, emotional, and inspiring. It wasn't about making excuses for what Kevin had done, but about showing that people can change, that redemption is possible. Joe didn't sugarcoat anything. He was honest about the mistakes that had been made, about the consequences of those actions. But he also highlighted the importance of compassion, of seeing the person behind the crime, of understanding that everyone has a story that led them to where they are. Rogan's influence goes beyond his podcast, beyond the UFC, beyond comedy. It's moments like these, moments where he steps up, not because he has to, but because he wants to, that define who he is. He's not just a podcaster, not just a comedian or a commentator. He's a guy who's willing to get involved, to take risks, to make a difference. Whether it's pulling up to a gas station at the exact right moment or using his platform to amplify voices that might otherwise go unheard, Rogan is someone who doesn't sit on the sidelines. The robbery at the gas station was just one night, one moment in a long career full of unexpected twists and turns. But it was a moment that encapsulated everything he stands for: courage, compassion, and an unwavering belief in the potential for people to change. It showed that even in the most chaotic, frightening situations, there is room for kindness, for understanding, for hope. Joe's path from a kid growing up in a turbulent household to a martial artist, a comedian, an actor, a commentator, and a podcaster has been anything but ordinary. It's been full of challenges, setbacks, and unexpected opportunities. But through it all, he's remained true to himself, unfiltered, unapologetic, and always willing to step up when it matters most. The gas station robbery was just one example, but it speaks volumes about the kind of person he is. From tough times to big success, Joe's choices show how one moment can change more than just a single night. Using fame to change lives. The legacy Joe Rogan is building isn't just about the millions of podcast downloads, the sold-out comedy shows, or the iconic UFC moments. It's about the lives he's touched, the people he's helped, and the stories he's shared. It's about the way he's used his platform to lift others up, to give a voice to those who might not otherwise be heard, and to remind us all that, at the end of the day, we're all just trying to make sense of this crazy world together. Rogan might be known as the podcast king, the UFC commentator, the comedian, but to Kevin, Damian, Melissa, and countless others, he's something more. He's a guy who showed up when it mattered, who took the time to listen, to understand, and to help. He's a reminder that heroes aren't always the ones in capes, that sometimes they're just regular people who decide to do the right thing, even when it's hard. And that's what makes Rogan's story, and the story of that night at the gas station, truly remarkable. If you've listened to The Joe Rogan Experience, you know it's more than just a podcast. It's practically a path through some of the wildest ideas and conversations out there. With over 2,000 episodes in the bag, Joe's had just about every type of guest you could think of, from conspiracy lovers to scientists who know their stuff, from comedians just out to make you laugh, to politicians that promise the moon and stars. It's all here. But it can feel like a maze trying to find the truly epic ones. Lucky for you, I've got a list of some episodes that are really worth your time. Take Elon Musk, for example. If you don't know him, well, he's the guy making electric cars mainstream and also trying to send humans to Mars. Yep, that Elon. This episode is one of the most watched for a reason. Elon is strange. Let's not sugarcoat it. And that's exactly why people love this episode. He talks about everything from the dangers of artificial intelligence to some mind-bending concepts about space. And the best part? He takes a puff of a joint right there in the studio like it's no big deal. Probably not the best PR move for a billionaire CEO, but it definitely got people talking. Then there's Edward Snowden. He's the dude who risked everything to tell the world that the government was spying on everyone all the time. Imagine deciding one day, yeah, I'm going to tell everyone what they're really up to and become one of the most wanted people on Earth. It takes guts, that's for sure. Listening to him talk with Joe about how the government can access all your data, emails, messages, everything, makes you think twice about your phone and who might be watching. This episode is heavy, but it's one of those you need to hear to get what's really going on behind the scenes. Another must-listen is Dr. Rhonda Patrick. Now, her episode is different because it's all about health, what to eat, how to live longer, and how not to mess up your body. She goes deep on things like omega-3 fatty acids and the best vitamins to take. It's actually kind of nice to hear someone talk about staying healthy in a way that's not too confusing. Rhonda breaks it all down into steps that you could actually follow without needing a medical degree. Next up, Neil deGrasse Tyson, everyone's favorite astrophysicist, because he somehow makes space easy to understand. His chat with Joe was all about the universe, why science matters, and how we really need to get a grip on critical thinking. Neil has a way of making you feel both incredibly small, in the grand scheme of the universe, and also pretty significant because understanding science is powerful. He takes these massive ideas and makes them fun. It's like sitting through a mind-blowing science class, but without the boring homework. Of course, there's Bernie Sanders, an episode that was bound to happen. Bernie was deep into his campaign when he visited Joe, and he talked about things like free healthcare and student loan forgiveness. Whether you love or hate his ideas, one thing's for sure, this conversation was a big moment for politics and podcasts. It gave Bernie a whole new audience, and Joe's show felt like a genuine place where a politician could really explain their thoughts instead of throwing out the usual talking points. But it's not all heavy stuff. There's Lance Armstrong. Yeah, that guy, the one who won the Tour de France a bunch of times, then got stripped of his titles because of doping. Lance didn't shy away from the controversy. He talks about it openly. Honestly, it's kind of refreshing to hear him just admit to his mistakes without dodging questions. Joe knows how to ask the tough questions, and Lance knows he has to answer. It's an episode that shows the human side of someone who went from hero to villain and is now just trying to find his place. Was Joe Rogan a hero stepping in, or did he take matters too far in a dangerous situation? Tell us what you think, and remember to like and subscribe for more.